Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone. And yes, I'm having a chat to you from Brighton. I thought strange experience. I put up a banner in my own house. I just thought I had to make it feel like a proper launch. Around this time at usual launches, I'm pouring out the wine and soft drinks for afterwards. So, grab your glass of wine or soft drink a bit later. As Ian said, we've almost worked too long on this digital guide. It was due for publication in March. Other things happened. We also decided to publish a number of other things. We published an emergency bulletin ahead of English school closure about some of the lessons that we'd learnt via Mark Steed, who you'll hear about later. Mark had already been in 6 weeks, I think, of lockdown in Hong Kong. And some of those lessons about remote learning, some of those lessons about how teachers felt about live lessons, how young people felt generally about remote learning, I think were really useful. And we then took a lot of that thinking and wanted to capture, and all the details of this are in the foreword of the digital guide, is we wanted to capture how parents and students throughout the UK were protecting learning. And we published a report that we must have done in about, I think, 5 to 6 days about the wonderful work that was out there. I still find it bizarre and strange that the media has this kind of narrative about teachers and educators having been sat in their deck chairs for the past 10 weeks. I can't understand why we aren't celebrating educators much more in terms of what they've managed to do, what they've learnt to do. And we are really talking about schools and colleges in a matter of days turning round systems, teaching, training, collaboratively working with each other as teaching staff to begin that journey to remote learning. Some of it before Easter was simple stuff. I think Easter was, for many, was a fantastic pause. It was a breathless speed, wasn't it, in many ways? Do you remember that intensity? And also schools open for key workers. And I can't understand, as I said, why we aren't celebrating our educators much more. So what you've got in this digital guide is, as Ian said, an attempt to be crystal clear about how you think about EdTech, not just in a crisis, how you think about education technology supporting teaching and learning for a longer term intervention, longer term support, right through from, what is your vision for EdTech? How is EdTech going to support what you want to do in terms of teaching and learning in your school, right through to some of the lessons that we've learnt from COVID. And I'll be talking in a little bit more depth later with the panelists. We're going to use over 140 odd questions that we've got, and also questions that you, the audience now live, can submit. And I'll try my best to find those, marshal those, and perhaps theme those up for our panelists. But we've learnt a lot, I think, during COVID. We've learnt, as I said, that EdTech should be not just for a time of crisis. We should be embracing it as a nation. We've done some things exceptionally well, but let's be honest, we've had a number of challenges, and I'd argue that not least of our challenges has been what's been called digital poverty, access to devices. Where has been the equality of access to digital during this pandemic? And I know some of our panelists will want to, and speakers will want to focus on that. Also, we have to be honest, we have encountered a creaky infrastructure, an infrastructure that has suffered from not only a lack of love, but also a lack of investment over the years. That should sadden us all, because we were not all equally prepared for what hit us in March, when our schools closed to the vast majority of pupils. Access, infrastructure, and also I'd argue that the depth of the professional development of educators out there was again not uniform, and I think some of that skilling up was done, as you know, was done in quick response to closure. Can we have a better way of continuous professional development around digital? I think so. And also, we're going to be touching on partnerships, partnerships that are beneficial, partnerships that are deeply trusting. They're partnerships that go from educator to edtech company to other partnerships that have been absolutely beneficial throughout this COVID pandemic. We'd urge, and we do in the guide, we urge people to look at partnerships that are productive for them as educators and invest in those partnerships of mutual trust. We've got a lot to learn. I think many of us are digesting some of the lessons. We need as well to debate this together. And then we also, I think, need to help schools take a much more strategic approach. As we're looking at September, we need to be thinking much more strategically about how we develop digital in our institutions. I want to thank Ian. Ian Phillips has been one of the early driving forces of this guide. Without him, and certainly without John Neal, who helped us with the research on the guide, we wouldn't be here. And certainly without some of the EdTech 50 schools who taught us so much. We launched the EdTech 50 last year, and it was clear from those that were recognized that if you're going to approach digital, then quite simply, you need to do it in a strategic way. You need to do it in a not a half-hearted way, but you need to do it, I think, taking certain steps, certain things into account. And what we've tried to do in the digital guide is distill this for a wider audience. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank ISBA, who were also one of the early people who were surveying schools and asking schools what were the challenges, and that's challenges both in the private sector, the independent sector, but also the maintained sector. And I want to thank all of our panelists and thank you, the audience. We're up to about 140 people now, and I think that's a fantastic amount of participants, and we're getting questions as we speak. So thanks for coming to the national launch. Do help yourself to a glass of wine or a soft drink, as I said, later on.